Some memories don't soften with distance. They just sit there, dry as the desert, waiting for you to stop pretending you forgot. If you've ever checked into a roadside motel after midnight, you know that particular quiet, the one that smells like old bleach and dust baked into carpet fibers, the one where the neon outside ticks in your peripheral vision and the air conditioner breathes like it's trying not to be noticed. That quiet holds more than it lets go. People pass through those rooms the way heat passes over asphalt, leaving ripples of things they shouldn't have said, prayers they didn't mean, apologies rehearsed to no one. Sometimes the walls answer, sometimes the vents do. Tonight I want you to hear 4 confessions I wasn't meant to hear, told by the people who can't stop hearing them back. Keep your lights low. Let the red of some vacancy sign bleed through your curtains. And if a phone rings only once, don't be the one who picks it up. Story 1. My name is Marco Reed. I'm 38, and until a few years ago, I managed the overnight desk at a little U-shaped roadside place in Needles, California, Mojave side, where the heat presses against the glass even after midnight. July of 2019, the kind of week where you can smell hot rubber on your own tires as you park. We called it the Sun Arrow Lodge because there used to be a sun-bleached arrow on the sign before a windstorm took it. The rooms were all ground level, doors facing a parking lot broken in places where the desert had decided to come back through. If you stood by the ice machine, you could see the Colorado shimmer like a bad promise. Nights were predictable. I wiped ash out of the concrete breezeway. I kept a radio low behind the front desk, classic rock, AM squall between songs. Truckers drifted in late, paid cash, pulled their caps down, and asked about vending machine Twix like it was real food. The neon vacancy sign outside made this little mosquito buzz every time it blinked. The laundry room was just off the office, a white box with a single fluorescent and a ceiling vent that shivered when the air conditioner kicked. Around 1:40 a.m., the motel was a sleeping animal. You learned to walk quietly through it. That night, the clock on the desk, cheap red digits, kept skipping to 1:59 and back to 1:58. Heat does that to circuits. I was restocking the trip-sized soaps. I remember the smell of lemon cleaner mixing with a thread of hot, dusty air pushing through the laundry room door. Then I heard it. A low whisper like someone had cupped both hands around a confession and was trying to push it through metal. At first I thought it was the dryer vent. Then the words came clean. The asphalt is new after marker 42. Do you see it? It shines at night. Forgive me. I put the soaps down. The ceiling vent in the laundry room was just a square of louvers screwed into drywall, black space behind, ductwork up there feeding out over rooms 6 through 10. Room 8 sat directly above the laundry. Room 8 was marked as vacant. It had been all night. The whisper went on, a man's voice, steady, tired. It didn't say what needed forgiving. It kept describing pieces of road, the fall-off where the shoulder crumbled, a fresh line of tar that wasn't the same black as the rest, the way newly laid asphalt reflects starlight before dawn. Then, almost as if it heard my question forming in my head, it said, "No, there was no blood." It paused. That is not the point. That froze me, because I hadn't said anything out loud. I had only thought, accident? And I had seen in the lazy theater of my head a picture of a swerve by a road marker and a crunch I never witnessed. The fluorescent above me buzzed, then dimmed halfway. It held there, like a breath caught. I took the master key and walked out into the heat. The air at 2 in the morning in Needles feels like opening an oven and leaning into it. The sky was a smooth black sheet. Room 8's curtains sat perfect, factory straight. I put the key in, pushed the door open. Darkness. That motel dark that still glows a little because of whatever sun the room absorbed in the afternoon. The AC unit under the window clicked in its slow rhythm. On, exhale, off, click. I put the lights on, clean. bed made with the kind of military corners housekeeping is proud of. 2 towels folded like doves, the Gideon tucked exactly where it always is. The vent above the bathroom door breathed a careful little draft. From the laundry room below, I heard myself moving in my memory. Once, at 18, sneaking out of my father's house near the I-10. This flash of an old fight by a viaduct where I'd lied rather than apologize. It wasn't a big memory. The voice in the vent said, I should have said I was wrong by the viaduct. My chest went cold, because now it wasn't just answering the shape of thoughts. It was quoting the ones I didn't say. I stepped onto the tub ledge and unscrewed the vent. Dust trembled out in a soft gray cloud that smelled like warm pennies and dryer sheets. The fluorescent in the laundry room below pulsed, bright, dim, bright, every time the voice said, forgive me, like the word ate a little current off the building. I pulled the vent cover down. From behind it, something slid loose and fell soft against the tile. Paper. A narrow strip, the kind we tore off the top of our shift reports when we switched over at dawn. Except it had tonight's date, my handwriting, bullet points written with the same cheap black bic I kept behind the front desk. Marker 42, absolution, no blood, not the point. At the bottom, a signature dash and 2 initials I'd used since I was a kid, MR. I wanted to laugh because that was the only thing standing between me and panic. I wanted to say, this is some kind of joke, a weird prank by the day guy. But my chest had that empty elevator feeling. I could smell dust and lemon cleanser and the hot metallic breath out of the vent, like something that had been exhaling for a long time and just learned a new word. I put the vent back up with hands that didn't want to hold the screwdriver steady. When I got down, the room looked like it had been staged, like none of the air had been disturbed. The whisper through the duct lowered itself until it matched something like my voice when I'm trying to be calm with drunk guests. It said perfectly, in my timbre, I won't check out. I locked 8 and marked it again as vacant. Back in the office, I put the slip of paper under the register, like hiding from a mirror that caught you in an ugly angle. Around 3:20 a.m., a couple from Kingman came in, face shiny from the road. I checked them into 6 and kept my hands visible on the desk so they wouldn't see them shake. When the sun poured itself flat and white over the lot, I tried to pretend I'd fallen asleep on my feet and dreamed the ducked voice. I made coffee that tasted like cardboard. I watched a plastic bag chase itself in the parking lot wind. Before I clocked out, I printed the previous night's occupancy report. 8. Comped, it said. Paid out in a little neat line item I hadn't made. Initials MR against the complimentary adjustment. I could have argued with software. I could have blamed the day manager. I didn't. I walked down to the laundry room and touched the vent. Warm, faintly breathing. The fluorescent above it flickered and steadied, as if embarrassed to have done anything odd in front of me. I gave notice a week later. The sun arrow had been kind to me, but I couldn't work in a place where the building itself kept a version of my voice on file. You can change jobs, but not air. Months later, at a warehouse gig inland, I heard a vent exhale when I thought about it too hard. It made a sound like a person considering whether to answer. Now I sleep with the AC off, windows shut, fans still. There are nights when the room gets too quiet, and I swear I can hear a whisper leaning toward me through a grate I sealed, shaping a confession I haven't made yet to anyone but the walls. It's not the heat that keeps me up. It's that the vents listen. Story 2. I'm Elena Moore, 31. Traveling nurse. I take fill-in shifts wherever they need bodies between Tucson and Flagstaff, a floating name on a schedule that changes while you're not looking. January 2021 had those desert nights where the cold isn't damp. It knives through hard and clean, lifting the sand so it rasps against your car like someone testing glass with their fingernails. I pulled into the Ocotillo Inn in Gila Bend just after 10, exhausted enough to cry if the vending machine ate my last dollar. Room 12. A rectangle of fluorescent light spilled under the door from the walkway. The rest was dark red flicker from the vacancy sign outside, pulsing on the curtain like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Routine saves me. Microwave dinner I can eat with one hand while I scroll tomorrow's orders with the other. Shower hot enough to steam the mirror. TV on low, not to watch, but to keep me from listening too hard. Everything smelled like bleach and that lemon citrus that never smells like a lemon. The bedspread felt like it had been washed 1,000 times and would never be soft again. Sometime after midnight, I turned the TV down until it was just blue light and murmurs. That was when I heard, through the wall on my left, a tiny sound like someone trying not to cry. Not sobbing, something smaller. Like a breath catching in a throat that had been brave all day and ran out of brave. "I didn't mean to leave her there," a voice said. Not loud, not whisper. Practiced. It sounded like words you say to yourself in a mirror before saying them to someone you love. The wall between 12 and 11 was thin. You could hear phones vibrate over there, coughing fits, late-night laughs. That's motel life. But the tone was wrong. It had this rehearsal cadence to it. Start, stop, repeat the line as if perfecting the speed. I picked up the room phone and hit 0. The night clerk sounded 19 and eager to help. I told him someone next door might need a wellness check. He paused, then said, careful like he didn't want to embarrass me, that 11 was out of service. They'd sealed it up a while back, mold in the walls. When I said, "But I can hear someone right now," the sound stopped mid-breath, as if the wall itself had drawn in a lungful and decided to hold it. I put the receiver down and told myself I was projecting. There's only so much breaking you can watch in ER bays before you start hearing it through drywall. I lay down, phone on the nightstand. I put my personal cell into airplane mode because if I didn't, the scheduler would ping me at 3 a.m. with a new, urgent assignment that wasn't. At 3:18 exactly, the room phone rang once, the kind of hollow plastic ring that echoes in your teeth. It didn't ring again. I sat up so fast the bed screamed against the floor. My cell lit with a new voicemail icon. Impossible, airplane mode. I played it anyway because that's what we do. We open doors that say "do not enter" just to prove we are still in charge of our own hands. The message began with wind moving grit across a microphone, shh, shh, like a contact mic pressed to the outside world. Under that, the soft insect hum of the neon sign bleeding in around the curtain. Then a woman spoke. "I know my voice. You know yours too. It was mine. I didn't mean to leave her there," I heard myself say, my exact rhythm, my exact flat little way of pressing guilt into a sentence until it looks like a folded napkin. And then the message cut, abrupt, like it had bitten down hard on itself. There was a white Bible in the drawer. I pulled it out because I needed to handle something with weight. A Polaroid slipped out and skidded onto the carpet. It was room 12, my room, empty. Bed made, television dark, same curtain pattern. In the bottom margin, in blue ballpoint, someone had written, "Don't answer when it rings." The TV shifted to the local channel by itself, sound still low. The crawl showed weather 3 days old. I told myself hotel remotes get crossed all the time and planted my back against the headboard. The walls started breathing again around 3:30. That practiced tone. I didn't mean to leave her there. The pause caught my timing. This was the exact way I'd been thinking about my last shift, about the elderly woman I'd parked on a hallway chair when the code blue came in. I'd gone back for her. I had. I know I had. 10 minutes isn't leaving. 10 minutes is triage. But I'd seen her later, sitting exactly how I placed her, hands folded over a paper mask she didn't trust. Her eyes had the patience of someone who knows waiting is the final test. The room phone rang again. Not one polite ding this time, but a full, lusty motel ring. The caller ID read Room 11, internal extension. I let it ring long enough for its echo to become the sound in the room. I answered because some part of me wanted to put the feeling somewhere, on a voice, on a person I could argue with. Hello? It was a strange way to hear air. The sound on the line followed me, not the other way around. When I inhaled, the footsteps on the other side of the wall made the same distance in the same time. When I held my breath, the steps stopped. Wind dragged across the phone line like someone holding it in the open air, a motel's neon humming under it like a tuning fork. Then my voice, and not exactly. It was missing warmth, missing the way I flinch a little when I have to say anything honest. I didn't mean to leave her there, I heard. And then, as if the line knew the exact thought I was biting down on, it added, alone. I said I had not. I said 10 minutes. I said the word triage like a courtroom. The voice didn't argue. It repeated it once softer. The wall at my shoulder felt cold despite the heater working double time under the window. Morning did its thing, brought a kind of pale salvation through cheap curtains. I took the Polaroid and the phone to the office. The new clerk had a face that had never worked a night in its life. He told me, cheerful, that room 11 had been sealed since 2018. Construction board over the door. Signs. He told me they'd had a mold inspector out. He pulled up my invoice. Adjoining, he said, tapping the screen. 1112. Cool. Haven't had one of those in a while. I pulled the Polaroid from my pocket and showed it. He handed it back without looking, like a person returning a photograph that might be of a child or of a ghost. I drove north on I-8 in a clean, thin light that made everything look less complicated than it is. In a care center near Buckeye, an old man stopped me as I crossed his room and took my wrist with a dry paper hand. I didn't mean to leave her there, he said, in a voice like an old door. Then he laughed once, not amused, just surprised. Do you hear that? He asked, and looked around at the vents. I mute every ringer now. I put phones face down. I sleep with the TV barely talking just to make a shape inside the quiet. Some nights I still flinch when the ice maker in a hallway decides to dump. On nights like that, I hold the Polaroid up to whatever light there is and study the empty room in the picture, the tight bed, the little black eye of the TV. I try not to think about how clean an empty room looks when nothing is breathing in it. Since that night, I haven't trusted the sound of a phone, because even when it doesn't ring, it leaves a ring of silence around your ears, and in that ring, I can still hear myself finishing a sentence I wish I never started. We call places like that temporary, as if the walls don't keep anything. But the desert doesn't respect our sense of duration. It takes what we bring, dries it out, and hands it back in a whisper or a ring. The next two confessions live in a different register, one in the static of a bedside radio where accidents arrive before they happen, and another in the red blink of a motel sign that punctuates sentences no one should practice out loud. Story 3. Name's Nate Holloway. I'm 45 now, and I've been running tow out of Phoenix long enough to know what heat does to a road and what night does to a man. August of 2008, monsoon season, flirting and failing, big black bellies of cloud rolling up from the south, all threat, no rain. I caught a break in calls around midnight and decided not to push it all the way home. Pulled off near Quartzsite, US 60 where it bows a little, and took a room at the Silver Cactus Motor Court. 23, end unit with a view of the lot, my wrecker backed in and glow-bathed by the sick red of the vacancy sign as it blinked like a slow warning. If you've spent enough nights in road rooms, you know the smell. Smoke scrubbed but not gone, cleanser that has more ambition than talent, and under it this dry mineral scent like sun-baked concrete that's learned to sweat. The AC unit clicked a metronome under the window. On, exhale, off, click. I ate a cold burrito out of reflex and turned the bedside radio to some AM that didn't come in enough to be music but still sounded like company. Static in the desert has a different texture. Thinner, like you're listening to distance itself buzz. I was aiming for sleep when the static shifted. You can tell the difference between a station trying and a voice finding you. The radio didn't so much tune in as stand up on its elbows. "Rollover by mile 117, a man said, like he was telling somebody who was already there. His voice had no dramatic on it. Tired, like a truck stop coffee right after midnight. Functional, burnt around the edges. That was on me. I sat up because 117 is a marker I've worked. He kept talking over the static like it was the priest's screen between us. Should have seen the groove where the rain carved under the new asphalt. Cones set crooked, my fault, forgive the delay. When you do tow long enough, you build a mental atlas of trouble. Mile markers where people decide they can make a pass they can't. Crosswinds that pick up a light back end just enough to introduce chaos. He mapped my atlas out loud. Stuff I'd already seen. And then he said, 2 car by the cattle guard after 118, and I didn't know that one because it hadn't happened yet. I told myself it was a story, some late-night caller bleeding in from another frequency. I reached to turn the knob and the radio crackled like it winced, then said, plain, "Nate, don't. Hearing your name in a sentence that should have no idea what your name is rearranges your bones." The AC clicked off and the room got very quiet. In the red pulses from outside, the cord of the radio looked like a vein. "I know this sounds wrong," the man said, "but you listening makes it right. It closes it. It lets things go the way they went." The smell changed. Not a lot. Just a thin thread of something like hot rubber laid down hard and new. You don't forget that smell. It always arrives with heat lines on asphalt and gouge marks in the shoulder. My fingertips itched like they do when I've been working a winch for too long. I asked how he knew my name. I worked my mouth but didn't push air through it. The man answered anyway. "You put a notepad under the radio. You always have." His voice went off script, like something else stepped in behind it. He said softer, "Don't make me say it all again." Monsoon thunder showed off far east, but the air above the motel stayed as dry as brushed bone. I stared at the cardboard clock glow on the radio. The numbers told me 146, then hesitated so long I counted 8 heartbeats before they stuttered to 147. I've got a mentor who taught me the difference between hurry and move. Earl, dead 3 years by then. He was the one who taught me how to step out onto a scene like you were stepping into a story that had been in progress before you got there and would continue after you left. The voice on the radio cleared its throat with a little static cough and then began to read. Dates, times, the kind of abbreviated lines we put in our incident books out of habit more than need. He said them in Earl's rhythm, this patient, unhurried way that made it sound like if you listened well enough, the road would remember for you. I stood up without meaning to, the room agreeing with that movement by creaking once in the wall. October 26th, 98, eastbound 18-wheeler into ditch at 2:05, no injuries, driver shaken, used tow straps. He even got my shorthand, TS for tow straps, EB for eastbound. He went on, and then he said, in a voice that wasn't quite Earl's anymore, but borrowed his breath, August 15th, 08, rollover at mile 117. You heard this last night. You will hear it tonight. The burrito in my stomach picked that moment to decide it was a mistake. I sat back down. I put a hand on the radio, like you might put a hand on a worry to keep it from flying up and chewing your neck. You listening makes you the delay, the voice said. Not unkind. Just like a mechanic saying a part name. The cones will be set, the rain will come, But you listening is what makes the times line up like they do. I don't know why that line hit as hard as it did. Maybe because lately I had been arriving just late enough to help, not early enough to stop anything. Maybe it was the way I'd started to hear static in the cab, even when the radio was dead. I thought about Earl's funeral, about the incident book I couldn't bring myself to open because I knew where his last entry was, and I wanted to keep it undisturbed. The red from the sign outside slowed, then sped up, like a heartbeat that didn't want to admit it had been running too hard. I pulled the plug on the radio, expecting silence. Static shrugged, rolling in anyway, now like it wasn't coming from the radio at all, but from the room. The voice took a breath that coordinated with mine. "Nate," it said, "don't go to 117. I didn't know if doing what it asked would make me complicit or brave. I lay back and watched the ceiling, which had the kind of swirls in plaster that looked like somebody had painted over fingerprints. I told myself I was being worked, that somebody had a transmitter and a sense of humor, but nobody on Earth has Earl's cadence unless they learned it from him. At 3:03, the rain came hard all at once, like somebody finally opened the lid on a tank car above the town. It pounded heat out of the air and off the roof. I slept in the way you sleep when you know you have a decision coming that will make you dislike yourself either way. Just before dawn, the radio quieted itself like a person tiptoeing out. The AC hiccuped back into a routine it trusted. I showered in water that smelled faintly of rust and pulled on damp denim. I made a choice. I did not go to mile 117. I took a call 2 exits west, a stall with a battery that had given up its ghost. The woman cried because it was 4 a.m. and she was alone, and the storm had made everything sound like an oncoming train. By 8, I was drinking bad coffee out of a foam cup at a diner, TV up in the corner tuned to local. The anchor read a story in her morning voice, the one they teach you that can move between tragedies without catching. Roll over at mile 117. 2 cars. Cones late to arrive because the wreck blocked the shoulder. Driver okay. Passenger bruised. Witnesses say, she said, delay in response due to lightning. The footage showed rain hissing on new asphalt, steam like breath. The motel office printer made a sound like a cicada when the clerk ran my checkout. He had the kind of cheerful face that doesn't last in this line of work long. He slid me the invoice with a pen attached to a chain and an absent look like he was thinking about breakfast burritos. "You want your radio back?" he asked, nodding toward a small pile of lost and found on the back shelf. "I didn't bring one," I said. He scratched his head, picked something up from behind the counter and placed it on the desk with a flourish, proud like a kid showing a found treasure. The exact twin of the bedside radio sat there with a piece of masking tape on it. Property of N. Holloway, written in a careful block hand that looked like mine when I'm filling out forms. 23 etched faintly into the plastic with a key. "I'll pass," I said, and felt stupidly polite while a small, sharp thing moved through my chest. I drive without the radio now. It's not safer. It's just quieter in a way that lets me tell myself I'm not participating in whatever exchange the night wants from me. But quiet is a shape that fills itself. Static lives in the seams, between the weather and the road, between my breath and the glass. Some nights, on the long straight stretches west of Tonopah, the red of some sign a mile off will blink against my mirror and I'll think, you listening makes you the delay. I turn up the hum of the engine to drown it. Of course, that hum is just another kind of static. You can drive out here for hours and never lose the feeling that something is narrating road you haven't met yet, and that the story doesn't need you, but it keeps saying your name anyway. Story 4. My name is Daniel Park, 52. Forensic auditor out of El Paso, insurance fraud, municipal contracts, places where numbers learn to lie and the people behind them invest in the lie like it's stock. Divorced 5 years. You don't notice how loud a house was until you live by yourself long enough to hear what the quiet asks back. October of 2016, a cold wind making dust behave like weather. I took a 2-night job in Lordsburg, New Mexico, small town council with records stacked in a room that smelled of damp paper and coffee burned into a pot. I checked into the Blue Mesas Lodge around 9:30, the kind of place where the lot looks like a chessboard with half the pieces missing. Room 10. No room next to it on the map. It sat at the end of a narrow, shrugging row, and beyond the wall on the left there was supposed to be nothing but a utility crawl, and further, the shadow of the sign. The sign did most of the talking. Vacancy in red so saturated it seemed to leak into air. The curtains did their best to block it. They failed. The room ran on pin-scented cleaner and the soft rot smell of carpet that has seen too much and been excused for it. I open laptops like other people open prayer books, files, tabs, numbers lined up and behaving. The habit of precision has been the only monastery I've found. The heater under the window ticked like it had a memory of fires it never saw. I turned the TV to a local channel and then muted it because ambient lie is better than silence. Around 11, a voice interrupted in the oldest way. A man a few feet away on the other side of something thin. It came from the wall on my left. Words at first without meaning, just the cadence of a person practicing apology. Then the shape of the thing came through. He was rehearsing what he was going to tell his wife. It was emotional. I didn't sleep with her. It wasn't about... He stopped. The red outside blinked. His pauses began to line up with the sign's pulse, like he had decided to let the light punctuate his sentences for him. It's not an excuse. I froze for a petty reason. He used a phrase I had used, not just the meaning, the line. I could hear myself in him, not because guilt is generic, but because I recognized a scaffolding I had built once upon a time. There's a specificity to the way we rehearse self-defense. The syllables fit like a shirt you've already broken in. He went again, trying "I didn't sleep with her" in a different meter, landing on the "didn't" harder, as if emphasis could be proof. The sign blinked, red, nothing, red, like a metronome that didn't care what song you thought you were playing. I do numbers for a living, but it's language that keeps me up. I got up. I pressed my palm flat to the wall. It was cool, as if the wind outside had found a way in only there. I said, through it, "I can hear you." The voice didn't answer, but the sign outside took that moment to accelerate, or maybe I only noticed. The room got a faint stutter of red, white that made everything look like it was being looked at. I wrote a note because that is how I manage when words start feeling like a test. On a piece of hotel stationery I printed in my small, neat hand, "Leave. You're rehearsing to a wall." I meant it as kindness, like telling someone they have spinach in their teeth. I lay on the carpet and found where the baseboard was loose. There wasn't enough clearance underneath for a note to travel anywhere but the wrong side of my own room, but I pushed anyway, into the seam where wall met wall. The television woke itself up to the local station, audio low. The anchor read a story from 3 days ago about a stolen copper coil, the kind of thing that makes small places angry and then bored. I told myself I was in control of my own sets of facts. The bedspread's texture under my palm felt like bark without tree. My note came back under the door, edges blackened as if it had been elsewhere. Same piece of paper, same handwriting, each letter a hair off like an echo that doesn't quite believe in itself. At the end of my sentence, in that same hand, someone had added, "We both are." I stared at the dash and the 3 words as if they were an audit trail I could break. You spend long enough reading what people don't want you to see, you start to think you're immune to seeing what you don't want to. The heater clicked off. The sign pulsed. The wall didn't move, but my sense of it did. It felt less like a boundary than a membrane. I knocked, not gentle, Once. Twice. "If you can hear me," I said, "you should go home," which is a funny thing to tell a voice that might be me. The phone rang. The noise was ancient and immediate, the kind of ring that makes you think of wires hung on poles and rain-soaking lines until speech swims. Caller ID said 10A. There was no 10A. I let it ring and had the sensation of being graded. On the fourth ring I answered, because I'm a coward in exactly the way that doesn't look like it. "Hello?" I said, and heard my hello before I finished saying it. The voice on the line had my structure, my spacing, only stripped of warmth and irony, language as ledger. "You never rehearsed for her," it said. It sounded like paper sliding across wood. "You rehearsed for the room." I closed my eyes and saw that night I prefer not to revisit. Me standing in a smaller apartment, a smaller man, arranging sentences in my head that would make my performance efficient. I had told myself efficiency was kindness, the fewer words, the less hurt. Later I understood that brevity had been a way of keeping distance from what I owed. I had practiced not to convince my wife. I had practiced to survive the sound of my own voice while I said something ugly in a room that would keep the shape of it after I left. The line went quiet. It didn't click off. It just went to a kind of listening I recognize from work, the way a man under review waits to see which file you'll open next. The red light at the window washed the room white between pulses. I felt the absence of a presence on the other side of the wall and knew something about that absence was staging me. I packed because motion is proof you're real. I put the note in my pocket and the TV remote on the nightstand exactly parallel to the edge because precision is religion when everything else wants to blur. I slept like someone had borrowed the middle of my night. Dreams thin, a sense of the sign blinking under my eyelids like a lighthouse that only warns you when you're already on the rocks. Morning had the chalky quality it gets here, the sky a white board that hasn't been cleaned well. I took the invoice at the office, the manager squinting at a terminal that looked older than both of us. He frowned in a way that made me think numbers had misbehaved, but not enough to call the police. Adjoining, 10A, sealed, he read out loud, as if trying the word on for size. "We don't..." He waved toward the row, toward where my wall met the idea of a wall. "Have that." "Must be a system thing," I said, which is what we say when we don't want to choose among explanations. He offered me coffee that had learned bitterness as a native language. I declined. In the parking lot, the vacancy sign had gone blind in its A and was advertising VCNCY in a way I preferred not to read as omen. Numbers are faithful, they add or they don't. But the rooms we do our sums in remain. Months later, in an Albuquerque hotel with different curtains and a different brand of pin cleaner, I lay awake at 3 watching a different red sign find the same seam. I could feel it punctuating something I wasn't saying out loud. I don't talk to walls anymore, not with my hand on them, not with pen under the baseboard. I keep my voice to myself and the rooms to theirs. Of course, the rooms don't consent to being kept. They were here before us. They will keep our edits and our drafts and our rehearsals and the final thin thing we end up saying when we run out of practice and have to make it real. If there's a number for that, I haven't audited it yet. Meanwhile, the red still finds its way through. The desert is good at pretending it's empty. Spend enough nights in it and you know better. These places of passage aren't blank. They're carbon paper. You write on them, and whatever you think didn't transfer does, and it shows up later somewhere you didn't mean to send it. A motel room at 2 a.m. is a kind of collection plate. It collects sorries. It collects confessions whispered to vents and rehearsed to walls and smuggled through hotel phones and slipped into static. I've heard enough now to know we don't get to decide when our words begin or end. We only choose whether to put our ear to the seam and listen. Since then, silence bothers me more than any scream.